Archaic Records.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Archaic Records here with you again. My name is Jamie, coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee. And we have another Death on Mars segment for you today, which means that Marina is back in the house, along with her best friend and codependent shadow known as Scratch the Chihuahua. Marina and I had quite the weekend this past weekend, which means that we have two Death on Mars segments to record today. It isn't often that her and I venture out of the house twice on one weekend. We are becoming a couple of old fogies, but earlier this weekend we were out in Memphis for the big Sierra Farrell show at Overton Park Shell, and yesterday we were out at our local Cineplex to take in the 2024 remake of the Generation X classic from 1996, I believe, or 1995, for The Crow, which is what we're going to be talking about on today's episode. Originally, we thought about sort of combining our weekend into one long episode, but we got to talking about it yesterday, and we were thinking to ourselves that people that are Sierra Farrell fans may not necessarily be Crow fans, and people that are Crow fans are not necessarily Sierra Farrell fans. But for me, this Crow movie was something that I was actually pretty excited about when I first heard about it. Now, this was a movie I didn't even know this remake was happening until not too long ago when you actually sort of sent me the trailer to my phone. Mm-hmm. This is a movie that, if you're my age, Generation X, or probably your age, millennial generation, that is very sacred territory. I know a lot of people my age that are just die-hard obsessed Crow fans. Now, for me personally, I would say that I am a casual Crow fan of the original movie. I never liked the sequel, City of Angels, which I admit probably puts me in the minority, but if I'm being perfectly honest with you, the best Crow movie is Wicked Prayer from 2005, starring Edward Furlong and what's her name?
Tara Reid.
Tara Reid. Kidding, of course, that is not the best.
But we have watched all of them.
Yes. But before we get into this movie, I mean, what was your excitement level? What was your expectation heading into?
Well, I mean, I was excited for another Crow movie because I was hoping maybe they could like reboot the franchise sort of properly. I actually liked City of Angels. It was one of those movies that if you kind of read into was really cut apart and turned into something different in like post-production. So that's a movie I would love if we could get like a director's cut. So I don't know. Obviously the first Crow movie is sacred. I think it's perfect. It's a little cheesy. It's fun. It is just one of those like quintessential goth movies. It was funny going to the theater yesterday. Jamie and I went like, all right, who do you think is here to see The Crow? And it was anybody in combat boots and black.
Yeah, you can sort of point out the people that were there to see The Crow.
I mean, I was like kind of like cautiously optimistic, honestly, because I liked it there. At least there was a bigger budget. And it seemed like we really were trying to reboot it to be something different. So I was going into it with, I don't know.
Well, I will say this, like, when I first found out that this movie was being made, I was excited about it. Like I said, I'm a casual fan of the original Crow movie. And I don't normally do this, but I went back and I started reading some reviews of the movie before we went to go see it yesterday. And I got to tell you, based on some of the reviews I was reading, I was sort of feeling a little bit squeamish going into this movie because I have read some reviews of this film that are just putrid.
Yeah.
And it's been well documented by now that this movie has sort of bombed at the box office. I mean, you and I go to the movies fairly regularly, and it doesn't seem to matter which movie we go see. There's never anybody there. Yeah. I mean, we were in there yesterday, and I mean, there may have been 8 people in there.
I mean, we do go on Tuesdays in the afternoon, so there's that. We're not going on like Thursdays when things are being released. We work weekends, so there's two sides to that. But people also don't go to the movies like they used to. People stream a lot more. So the whole movie world has changed a lot. Movie theaters, I'm just probably sounding old now, but they're not as fun as they used to be. Yeah. Even though they have the reclining seats and 4DX, which they did offer for this movie, but we decided against it because it sounded mostly like water effects, and I just don't know how I feel about that. So.
Yeah, so walking into this movie yesterday, I was feeling a little bit sort of squeamish when it came to my expectations. But I got to tell you that all in all, I thought that the movie actually turned out, considering my relatively low expectations going into it, it actually turned out to be not super disappointing. There were elements of the movie that I thought were really good. One of the big complaints that I had read among critics and fans alike was the casting of the main character, Eric Draven, who was played by Bill Skarsgård. And actually, I got to be honest with you, apart from the fact that this kid looks exactly like Little Peep, I actually thought he did a really good job.
I thought he did too. Yeah, I think critics were like a bit too harsh about this movie, and it just goes to show. I mean, there's a lot of movies that have come out that critics hated that turned out being cult classics, which actually I think is something that might happen to this movie. I could see people watching it later on and being like, "Oh, it wasn't that bad." I also read some of the reviews, and just first of all, there's going to be spoilers in this review, so be aware now. But I just don't read reviews before you go see a movie, because I think it's gonna kind of plant some seeds.
Yeah, that's something you're looking for.
Yeah,
normally I don't do.
I was just so excited about this movie that I did read reviews, because I was actually really hoping that it was going to be a commercial success, because I love The Crow and I would love to see them make more movies. And as far as superhero movies, I'm not really into superhero movies, but it would have been great if this had done really well and we had sort of like a different superhero movie to watch other than Marvel, which I'm sorry, I'm so tired of Marvel movies.
Yeah, 2 or 3 of the trailers we saw yesterday are just the Marvel.
It's just
DC
like, how many does there have to be? Can we just like...
All right, well, let's get into the story of the film
Sure.
just a little bit. The movie starts off, of course, sort of in the spirit of the original one, as it sort of describes and builds up the love story between the two main characters, which I liked to a point. Now, I will make the argument that the opening, scene of the movie, or the opening, the story between the two main characters, I think it was well done, but I also think that it was extremely drawn out. And as you and I will talk about a little bit later on, I think it is detrimental to the story as the movie goes on, because I feel like at the beginning you have this love story that's a little bit overly drawn out. Now, I appreciate the fact that you want to establish the relationship between these two main characters, but I feel like the love story at the beginning is so long that the second half of the movie, once the movie actually starts, the whole story just snowballs.
Yeah. The pace, I mean, that's one thing I'll say is definitely the pacing was off. I like that they gave some time for the love story, so, it makes sense why he would, feel this need for revenge and he wouldn't pass on. But it felt kind of fragmented. I didn't kind of love... I loved how they did in the original Crow movie with flashbacks, kind of tied into his vengeance plot line. It felt like Eric Draven didn't even become the Crow until like the last part of the movie, which I didn't love, because you're watching The Crow, so whatever. It just felt a little fragmented and slow in parts, and then suddenly there was action, and then it would get slow again. So I think that's really the really problem with this movie was just kind of pacing. I would watch it again to kind of, see if I can get a different perspective on it. But from the audience standpoint, pacing for me, yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like by the time the movie actually starts, by the time that he and his girlfriend are killed, the movie it feels as if it's 2/3 of the way over. And I feel like that part of the story was sort of over-explained and over-drawn out, where once the movie actually starts and the vengeance plot begins, it just goes so fast. And one of the things you and I talked about yesterday when we were driving home from watching this film was, to me, there was just very little character development when it came to the villains. I mean, these people show up and they're dead. They show up and they're dead. And you don't understand really who they are. You don't understand why you're supposed to hate them. They didn't really have any depth. And you and I were talking about this last night. I mean, there needs to be a director's cut of this movie, because I get the sense, you and I were talking about this yesterday, I get the sense that a lot of the story in this movie ended up on the cutting room floor, because, you are introduced to this whole just herd of villains, but none of them have any depth. None of them have really any story. And he's just basically going through and just killing people, at just this blinding pace. And you don't even really understand who any of these characters are. Right. None of them have any individuality.
Yeah, I think that's why I really like the second Crow movie. I love the first one and the second one. I thought they were both good. But, in both the first and second Crow, first when Eric Draven has his moment where he, is seeking vengeance on people who did these terrible things to his fiance, and he has his moment to really extract revenge on them. And he has this in the new movie, but like Jamie was saying, you don't as much understand. I mean, obviously you understand why he's going after them because these people killed him and his girlfriend, but it would have been. I think they were just a little bit underdeveloped. I actually liked the main villain. I thought his story was interesting. I thought what he could do was interesting. I think I just would have liked to see more of that, and I think I would have understood things better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there was this one female character who was the sort of like the main badass villain,
she's a henchman.
She's this henchman, and she really doesn't have any sort of backstory. And there's this scene towards the end of the movie where he confronts her and basically takes her out, and it's just so anticlimactic because it happens so quickly. You don't really know anything about who this person is, apart from the fact that she's just, I guess, just the personification of evil, because she really doesn't have any depth. But that was, again, I think that was because the first part of the movie was just overly.
Well, yeah. Well, and also, you're also coming from the opera scene at the very end where he just kills 20 people at once in really brutal ways. And actually, I really liked the action sequence. I've heard some people say they didn't like him because I guess they're using airsoft technology in the filming, because obviously they don't want the same accident that happened with Brandon Lee back in the movie in 94. And I can understand that. I actually thought the fight scenes were really great. I would have loved to see more of them. But there's a scene where he finally does kill her, and she says something like, I didn't realize how bad it was at first. It was just going on behind closed doors, and then all of a sudden you're part of it. And I think it would have been cool to hear more about her story.
Yeah, or see a little bit of
that.
her
Just,
progression within this.
Right, yeah.
This evil.
Because she was an interesting character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another character I felt was completely underdeveloped was the girlfriend's mother.
Ah, yeah.
Who is... There's a scene where she explains the fact that she was sort of a bad mother and she was never there for her daughter, and then suddenly she's just dead. And you don't understand, what does that actually mean? How does this affect her daughter into her adult life? Because at the beginning of the movie, Eric Draven and this girl meet each other in rehab. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to know, how did this girl end up in rehab? Was this mother's incompetence? Was it a contributing factor to the way her daughter turned out? Or her daughter's struggles? And, it was just sort of mentioned and then it went away.
Yeah. I mean, they touched on the fact that basically it sounds like the mother kind of sold her soul or sold her daughter for this better life for both of them. It ended up not being worth it, which was part of the reason that Shelley was involved. I can't remember the main villain's name with him. And, it comes out, obviously spoilers, in the movie that he was having her kill people and things like that. But I think that deserved a little bit more time. Yeah. So I think we should talk about Eric Draven a little bit and Bill Skarsgård. What did you think of him?
I thought he was really good. I definitely think that, this one of the things about this particular Crow movie, and it starts with his sort of aesthetic, is I feel like this movie, one of the reasons why it's not doing well, and one reason why I think critics don't really like it is because it's sort of being marketed to Gen Z, which I don't particularly have anything against, but the Crow sort of ends up looking like Lil Peep or this sort of SoundCloud rapper, and I thought that he did a good job. I didn't love his aesthetic, and especially even towards the end when he finally puts on the Crow makeup, it didn't really do much for me. To me, he ended up kind of looking like like a football player who paints their face up to go before the game. It looked sort of wonky. I didn't love the makeup, but I thought he actually did a good job. Now, you were telling me about this actor. He's in a bunch of other stuff that I...
Yeah, he's in It, and he's the brother of, Alex Skarsgård from True Blood, which we should watch, which I've made Jamie watch, I should say.
But I thought he did a good job. I mean, I feel like he was sort of overly criticized in some of the stuff that I read about him, but this is an instance where I just think that this movie is just being marketed to the wrong demographic. Yeah. I think that this is a movie that should have been marketed more towards the people that were the fans, and I don't think that not, again, this is nothing against the Gen Zers, but they didn't grow up on The Crow. I think a lot of these kids, I mean, you and I have conversations with young people all the time, and people, you ask people, are you excited about The Crow? They don't even know what The Crow is.
Yeah. Yeah, I really liked him in the movie. I definitely saw where they were going with the aesthetic, with the face tattoos and the haircut and the nail polish. They were. I just feel like they were trying to have The Crow reach a new generation with the casting and everything and some of the music. And I just don't think that, we're in customer service. We really do interact with teenagers a lot, and we have asked kids, hey, you excited about The Crow? And they're like, what's The Crow? So I think that it would have been cool if there was a little more marketing towards them, or maybe marketing towards I wasn't sure who was being marketed towards, because I don't really feel like kids have really heard of it, and the people who are watching it maybe just feel kind of old because we don't necessarily relate as much.
I think they're not liking it because it's not really that much.
Have they even heard of it?
No, I'm talking about people that are like our age. I think people that are our age that aren't liking it because it isn't very reminiscent of the original. But
I also will say, I think that's something I liked about it, was that I think Brandon Lee was perfect. I don't just want like a shot-for-shot Crow remake. I do like that they kind of had their own twist on it and their own aesthetic.
Yeah, I was hoping it wasn't going to be a shot-for-shot remake.
Really? Yeah, right. The only thing I really didn't like was just some pacing issues. But, I don't know. Overall, I thought it was great. Yeah, but I just think it was probably marketed towards the wrong people. I think maybe, once more people have seen this movie, maybe they'll get a little more acclaim, but...
Well, at the end, they leave it open for a possible...
Yes.
Sequel, I would not be opposed to, because, like I said, I thought going into this movie it was going to just be a bag of beans based on stuff I'd read. But I ended up being pleasantly surprised based on that. Now, is it the greatest movie I've ever seen? Of course not. Is it as good as the original? No. But I think it is an interesting take. I just wish that there was a lot more character development, especially when it came to... this sort of the villains, bad guys, because that is where I felt it was just a little bit empty. By the time, in my movie-going experience, or my desire when I go see a film, is by the time the bad guy purchases the farm, you just really want to, hate him, right? You want the worst fate imaginable, and... Sadly, I think that even the main guy, and you're right, the main bad guy was as developed as any of them, I guess. But even at the very end, when he takes out this, the head honcho, I don't have any feeling about him because I feel like he's just so underdeveloped as a character.
I think that is just kind of the theme in general that we found with the movie is maybe overdevelopment of the love story and just kind of like these fluffy scenes with them, and then underdevelopment of like the villains. And then something we talked about, at least in the first two Crow movies, I personally feel like the setting was really important. You have to obviously Detroit in the first one, right? And then obviously Los Angeles in the second one. And I feel like the city is almost a character, kind of like in Candyman, how Chicago was a big character in that, and then New Orleans in the second one.
Yeah, the setting matters.
The setting really matters, and you get the feeling that the main characters are just really in this kind of Gotham City, and they're just fighting this corrupt government that they have no control over. And, this Crow movie didn't have that as much, and I don't know if there were fans working on the movie.
Yeah,
but I think that was something important that wasn't there.
Yeah, I think that it would have helped if the people that had... maybe they are, I don't know the answer, but it did not feel that this movie was made by people that were fans, or written by people that were fans of the original two.
Or maybe it was just cut up towards the end. And
I have a feeling this turned out to be sort of a cutting room floor movie, because I like to believe. Because the thing is, you and I were talking about this last night, as much as the story is undeveloped, the story is there.
Yeah, it's there.
There is a story there, but... it's just disproportionately front-end heavy, in my opinion. Like you said, the development between the two main characters is cool, but, the second half of the movie, it is a blur. And one thing you and I talked about, and, they didn't ask my advice when they made this movie, mind you, but it would have been cool if they would have cut a little bit out of the love story at the beginning, but, like they did in the first movie, they intersplice some, memories or things like that, to sort of add to the love story, because it's just too much at the beginning.
Yeah, and it's kind of a lot of fluff. It's a lot of like aesthetically pleasing shots and
making love in designer clothes and penthouse apartments.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff. Right, which was fine, but I think that they could have developed the story. Now, one thing I think they did right was I really enjoyed the soundtrack, which has not been released on
the music in this
or
one, like the
anything
first
yet.
one, the music is just the jugs.
Yeah, I loved the mix of the 80s synth pop with new music that kind of felt like Queen of the Damned-ish.
Yeah, it has kind of a Terrifier 2 soundtrack kind of vibe to it.
It was good. Yeah, I enjoyed the soundtrack. I just hope that they release it on vinyl, because right now it's just some playlists on Spotify. Can we talk about how Enya was in the soundtrack, and that was kind of a surprise?
Yeah, Gary Newman too.
Gary Newman. I thought it was kind of cool. Yeah, I like that.
Enya, we were talking about this last night. Enya is somebody that, for a moment was just, not that she's not huge, she has tons of fans, but for a moment in the 90s, Enya was just huge. Every sort of goth, hippie, Lilith Fair girl went through a phase where they were obsessed with Enya.
Yeah. What was that? Her and I'm a big Lorena McKennitt fan, so
they both had their moment.
It is that kind of Ren Fair world music thing that happened in the 90s. Yeah. So yeah, but I thought it was a good fit. I liked it.
Yeah, I thought the soundtrack was great. I mean, the soundtrack of the original.
Now, let me ask you: overall, out of the now 5 Crow movies, how would you rank them? And then maybe at the end we can give a grade rating.
Well, I like this one. I don't like this one as much as the original, of course. But seeing as I've never been a fan of City of Angels, apart from the fact that Iggy Pop is in it, which I thought was literally the best part of the movie, I think this one is better than City of Angels. So of the 3 that I'm most familiar with. Now, again, of course, 2005, Wicked Prayer is the jugs. We all can agree on that. So, but of the 3, I would say this one is second, behind the first one and ahead of City of Angels, because there's
Salvation too.
Never.
Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah, I don't know that one as well.
Oh, you don't? Yeah, that one's okay.
I know that we own it, and we own the Edward Furlong one, which of course I'm joking. Okay.
Yeah, hopefully you're not taking him too seriously.
I mean, if you purchase the fact that Tara Reid is a mystic, I mean, I'm willing to suspend disbelief.
Yeah, agreed. I think I would rank them. Obviously, The Crow is first, and I would actually might. So I'm going to put this one second because I feel like it did get the budget it deserved and the casting, and not a lot of times movies you love never really get a chance to kind of get this level of remake. And then it would be City of Angels. But if City of Angels, to my grave, I will go, if City of Angels ever gets a director's cut and we kind of see the version of the movie that we were supposed to see, it would probably rank number 2. But right now it's number 3, and then it'd be Salvation, and then Wicked Prayer. Is that what it was?
Wicked Prayer.
Yeah. That's the ranking I would give it. Yeah.
Tara Reid as a psychic.
Yeah. Well, Edward Furlong is the Crow. Sorry, no offense, but poor guy. It was just like, watch it. It's kind of like it's kind of like the later Hellraiser movies where they had a script for something completely different, and they were like, oh, and we'll just put Pinhead in there. It sort of just felt like something where they're like, oh, let's just put Tara Reid and Edward Furlong in there, and then people will watch it. Yeah,
makes sense.
So,
I'm not a casting director, but I think you could have done better than that. So.
Yeah. Well, what grade rating did you give it?
For me, I'm going to give it like a C. I think it's not a bad movie. I think it is much better than the reviews that I had been reading by both fans and the sort of professional, quote-unquote, critics. I left feeling... actually, I was expecting it to be, like I said, I was expecting it to be just an abortion, but actually I found it to be entertaining, and when I go to the movies, that's basically all I'm hoping for. I found it to be undisappointing. I do think that they left it open to a sequel, which I would be surprised if they do based on
performance,
the mathematics of the situation, but I actually thought it was good.
I think I would rate it a C+ or maybe B-. I think if I go through and watch it again, I'll probably like it more, and I do believe over time this movie will become more popular. especially once we look back in 10, 20 years, like, oh, the aesthetics of the 2020s. I do think that this movie captured that really well, even though maybe I'm too old to really understand it now. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think I could see this movie in, it's hard to predict.
Yeah.
It's hard to even define what is a cult classic anymore. But I could see this movie in 10, 20 years being sort of a cult classic.
Either way, I say watch it, especially if you're a Crow fan. Make your own opinion about it. Don't listen to the reviews. It was not as bad as people say it is. And I want more movies like this. We want the goth movies back. I need the moody movies back, I mean, I would rather some original content, but I'll take
anything that's not Marvel and DC.
Yeah, just...
Thank you.
Something different, yeah. Agreed.
All right. Yeah, we had a Joker and a Captain America trailer for this one. So
yeah.
Pass. That's a hard pass on both of those.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, this is Death on Mars from Archaic Records. Thank you so much for checking out this video.
Thank you.
My name is Jamie, along with Marina and her pal Scratch.
Look, she's got the Crow makeup on. She's a fan of the Crow.
Go out and check out the new Crow movie. It is playing in theaters. I don't think you'll be disappointed. If
No,
you're a
you
fan
won't. Go see it.
And you go into it with, reasonable expectations, it's at least entertaining.
Yeah.
Anyway, be sure to go out and support your local record store. Check back most weeks for Morrissey Monday, a weekly celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths, as well as other record content and album reviews throughout the week. And we got another Death on Mars to film.
We do.
So until next time, my friends, talk to you then.